Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and this program is about the expansion of consciousness and particularly who we are within the contact experience. How does this change us? How does meeting the others, whoever they may be, wherever they may be from, change us and I think amplify our level of consciousness? And that's why I'm so happy to be talking to one of the originals, one of the people who really made a difference in this field, Lyssa Holt. Her book, The Prisms of Lyra, was a breakthrough. Thank you for that, Lyssa. She's also going to be featured at the Sedona Transcendence Retreat in September 2024 in Sedona, Arizona. Let's start with the Prism of Lyra, because that really put you on the map, right? And I know we want to talk about contact, but you somehow were able to move your consciousness, is how I perceive it, to the origins of this humanoid form and this level of consciousness. Talk about how you were able to do that and channel it.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. I mean, basically, I had some UFO sightings when I was a teenager. I grew up in New England, so I was living in New Hampshire. And it always just stuck in my mind, like it was this burning desire to know more. And if we fast forward to after I graduated college and I moved to the West Coast, so I was living in Los Angeles in the early 80s. And it was at the time when everything, the new age stuff was exploding, and Los Angeles was like the head of it, you know, really guiding everything. And I just remember going into the Bodhi Tree bookstore, which I worked in actually for 2 years in the 80s, and looking for books on this topic, and I couldn't find them. And it was so frustrating. And around that time, what was happening for me was the channeling process had started. That's a whole other story. So I was starting to begin to access this information, but I never realized that this would be where the universe would guide me. So fast forward again to the late 80s, I had moved from Los Angeles to Sedona, and I just had the burning desire again. I was actively channeling. So we just sat down and I was doing a weekly session every week. And every week we focused on a particular civilization until we could see that there was a tapestry being built that showed a bigger picture of our galactic heritage. And that those channelings became Prism of Lyra, which this is the second edition, but many of the viewers might remember the first edition with an ET on the cover.
Did you start channeling though because of your association with Daryl, Anka, and Bashar?
It all kind of started at once. When I moved to Los Angeles, I think it was 83, I moved to Los Angeles. And the next year, weird things started to happen for me. I started getting communication. I started seeing UFOs. It was before I had met Daryl, it had already started. But then there was just one day where a friend said, "Hey, let's go see this channel in the valley." And I thought, okay. And I thought I was going to see a guy channeling Dr. Peebles, I thought. But when I showed up, there's Daryl in a living room with like 10 or 15 people. And so I started to go see Daryl channel for like a couple of years with just a small amount of people in the living room. And he became a good friend and a mentor. And that kind of boosted my channeling and focused me and helped to answer some of the questions. But of course, there's always more questions.
Great guy, Daryl. He actually wrote a chapter in this book about his process of making contact with Bashar. I'm going to send you a copy of the book. And you can let me know what you think. But getting back to you and your story, because the Prisms of Lyra was so important because it established a foundation for galactic civilization. And what was it like for you to then discover that? How did that affect you and your work?
It affected me so deeply because at the same time, I was also starting to have dreams. And in the dreams, I would be in these other lives in some of the other civilizations. And I always felt that I was being downloaded with a tremendous amount of information that would unpack later when I needed it. And some of it came through the dreams, some of it came through the channeling. But at some point, as a channel, we have to cross certain bridges. And one of the bridges is how much are you going to trust the information that you receive and how much can you let go as a channel? So I crossed those many bridges over the years, over the decades. But when I chose to cross the bridge and surrender myself to the process, the information just got deeper and deeper and deeper. So it was definitely a process over these years. And I have to say it deepened even more, I'd say around 2010, because I was getting a lot of people who were asking me when I would do channeling sessions, can you tell me about my galactic heritage? And I was finding that the channeling process, the trance that I had to go through to pull up that information was so intense that it was really draining. So one of the beings that I channel, Germain, who is the one who channeled most of the information in Prism of Lyra, he finally said to me, or they finally said to me, look, we're going to create a system for you to make this easier. And so that is how we did the Galactic Heritage Cards, which is like an extension of Prism of Lyra to help so people can start accessing that information and that energy and the lessons themselves so that I didn't have to burn my battery as a channel. And but it's still ongoing. It's still deepening. I don't know where it's going to lead. We'll see.
Well, you're still channeling, but you're saying you're dropping to, when you say it's deepening, are you dropping in your conscious awareness to deeper levels of connection?
Yes, that I would say is one affirmative I can give about it. But also, when I say it's deepening, some of the information I'm starting to channel now is going into the emotional patterns of humanity and how we have, much like we adopt emotional patterns from our parents as in a human life, we've adopted emotional patterns from our galactic family too. So they're starting to talk more, and a lot of that comes through the cards too. And also the latest book, which is The Golden Lake, you can see it there, where it's now focusing on how do we heal these patterns? How do we move to the next level as a species so we break through and we don't repeat the patterns of our parents and mire ourselves in our own patterns? So it's also about healing the lineages, healing these galactic lines. And that's what I mean by deepening.
No, I appreciate that, and I think it's important work. Are there galactic emotional patterns that are different than the human patterns, or do we? There are. Can you talk about which ones would be not available or not aware of in human form?
Yes, I can talk about them, but when I talk about them, you're going to see that we as humans who are like the mixed breeds, so to speak, of the galactic family, that we do have pieces of these. So for instance, if we look at the Pleiadians, their pattern is that they always like to focus on the positive, and they weren't very good with processing their own shadows or their own pain. And so I can't remember what's in what book, and I think this might be in Prism of Lyra. I know you probably know that one. But one of the stories they tell is that there was a period of time when they were a younger species, when they had a planetary tragedy, which was kind of like a plague. and they couldn't heal themselves. It was an immune system plague, much like AIDS is and was on our world, but much, much worse than that. And finally, they had to go into their spirits to heal this because nothing was working on the physical level. And what they discovered was that it was their own darkness that they had pushed down, that they weren't willing to process, that had to come out somehow. So even now, their tendency is to not want to look at that, but because they know about themselves, they can heal themselves more quickly because they're aware of that pattern. So you can see what I mean, then we have that connection, right?
Especially in what used to be called the New Age, or the, you know, the ascending consciousness. It's like, oh, let's all love and light. And guess what? There's a lot of stuff that isn't, you know, and so I think that's a really key issue that, yes, we've inherited or taken on because we want to, you know, we want to accelerate our evolution, but actually going into the pain and the shadow is part of the evolution as well. So
Exactly. And you know, I feel like the universe kind of played a cosmic joke on me. I mean, I know we agree what we're going to do in the lives before we come in, but I ended up studying psychology in college, and everything just lined me up. The UFO sightings, the studying psychology, how I was connected with Daryl and the psychologists around him who were studying channeling. I mean, it was a grand plan, and maybe it took a couple decades to finally surrender to it, but now I can see, you know, we look around in our planet, and humanity is in a lot of pain.
yeah.
And there are those of us who are doing this kind of work who understand what's happening, and we're trying to work with ourselves and work with our shadows and heal this. But there's a lot of people that don't have that foundation. So I can see the bigger picture now through the channeling, that this is much greater. It's much greater than just making, you know, having contact or having a channeling session with someone. We're talking about healing the very unhealed pain in our lineage as a galactic species. And that's pretty big.
No, it's huge. And of course, Bashar says last chance for density, right? It's because, so I think it's all coming out now, the wars, the whatever, these awful things, because it has to be looked at, or else we're going to be stuck in that level, and another cycle will go through, and, you know, but so we have to look at what is making war, who is making, I mean, it's aspect of us, right? So what part of us is at war? And because we're all connected, because there's, you know, an entanglement with all of consciousness, on planet or off planet, I think as above, so below. So these other beings, everyone is working on this stuff, no matter what density you're on. So I think we're in this major, major change. I mean, obviously, right?
And another thing, you were asking about, you know, what civilizations had what wounds. And one of the things that's coming up now on Earth is a patterning after our Syrian forefathers. And from what I've been told, in their lineage, what happened was they got to a period of time in their development similar to where we are now, where there began to be a split, where there was one group that was willing to do what was necessary for the transcendence of consciousness, which is going into the shadow and healing all of that. And there was one group that was not interested in that at all. They were interested more in projecting the shadow on other people and creating deep, deep polarity and control issues, which is a little bit different than the whole Orion story. And so that literally caused a split in their civilization. The group that ended up in that dark path ended up kind of coming to a dead end, so to speak. And they did eventually achieve their transcendence, but we're seeing that also playing out on Earth now as well.
Absolutely. If we look at the wars that are happening, it's always a projection of the other over there, and that ultimately is a dead end, literally, figuratively.
Yes.
Because, yeah, I mean, it's been 10,000 years of war and tribal warfare. Stanton Friedman used to say, who wants to be friends with a bunch of apes whose favorite pastime is warfare? And that's been our
He has a great sense of humor.
original, right? And he was so matter of fact about it. And he wasn't into consciousness or anything like that. He was just like, this is how it is. But for you and your channeling and also the contact experience, so what's been like the revelation? Because Lyssa's going to lead a CE5 contact out in Sedona. I'm really excited about that. I'm going to try to get there, and lots of people should come for the whole weekend. So talk about what has your physical or etheric context been, and how do you call them in? That's interesting.
Well, this has been my passion since I was a teenager in college. So I went through different phases of training. Thank goodness they're training me, because it's a very confusing world out there with the whole contact thing. So basically, I can talk about it in phases. In the first phase, which would have been the late 80s and the early 90s, it was about going out in the desert and looking, where are they going to come? Sitting in my beach chair. We used to go to Malibu sometimes, or Joshua Tree when I lived in LA, and waiting for them to come. So that's kind of like a passive relationship with contact. But in 93, I started to channel information about this. So it became this book, Preparing for Contact. This is actually the second edition, so there's a lot more information in this one. But the first edition I channeled, and it was all about consciousness in contact and the connection. And I didn't know that anyone else was doing this, because when I would talk about it with people, they would just look at me like they didn't know what I was talking about. But then I went to Laughlin at a UFO conference there in the 90s, and I was speaking there. So this would have been the end of 93. And Stephen Greer was speaking there. So he was just getting going with CSETI. And I was shocked that he was talking about exactly what I had written in the book. And I finally felt vindicated that there was somebody else out there that understood this connection between contact and consciousness. So for a period of time, I got involved with CSETI way back before they were doing the government stuff and all that, running working groups. And so I learned a lot then in their protocols. But at some point, I realized for me as a channel that I had to follow my own protocols, because the beings that I work with, specifically Sasha, who's a Pleiadian, she would give me my own protocols that I felt went in a not better or deeper, just different in the direction I needed to go rather than the direction CSETI was going. So that period of time then, the 90s, did a lot of contact work outside, and we had a lot of amazing things happening that could be some of it in the sky, yes, but a lot of it strange phenomenon, strange things, simultaneous dreaming with team members of contact, things on the level of consciousness. So I'm trying to summarize it here. As we go into the 2000s, it became much bigger. It became about discovering the holographic nature of consciousness and how we, as a singular consciousness, are part of a greater one consciousness that is looking through many eyes. So that means the ETs are also this same expression of holographic consciousness. So that early 2000s part was all about coming to that realization and communicating or contacting with them on those levels. So we didn't have a lot of external things happening at that time. It was a lot of internal stuff. So now if we fast forward to the last decade, let's say, the last decade now, things have been integrating, meaning that we've still been working with this holographic idea of contact and consciousness, But now we've also been having amazing physical phenomena happen, which is in the 90s and the 80s, I was begging for, but obviously wasn't ready for. But now, because consciousness has changed so much in the last 30 years, we're getting more and more and more ready for that.
What kind of physical manifestations are you seeing?
Well, I'd say the very first thing that is significant that happened was in 2017. And I do a lot of work in Japan. So I used to do a yearly contact retreat there in the summer. And I was in Japan. We had just finished our outdoor contact work, and we were putting the gear away. And one of my students just randomly was shooting into the dark. And he shot a picture of me in a series of pictures, but it was only one picture where there is really clearly it looks like a being with big head and shoulders standing next to me. And it looks like I'm looking right at him. And when you zoom in on the picture, you can actually see a face through me as if I'm transparent. It's really, really weird. And I've studied this so much, the picture, and it can't be anything other than what it was. I saw the picture right after it was taken. Nobody doctored it, et cetera. So that's one thing. The last couple of years, before COVID and the early years of COVID, actually, we were still doing retreats. We started to have, there was a retreat place we use in Arizona for a while, and we started to have very clear, direct response of craft in the sky to the work that we were doing. The very last retreat we did at this location, I was shooting into the sky, into the black sky. There was absolutely nothing. And you're shooting on a phone. You're not going to try to shoot the moon and it looks like it's it's like a tiny dot. So I'm shooting and I almost deleted it because I thought I got nothing, but I checked the film and there's a lighted craft that's a triangular shape close up that comes right into view on it was an iPhone 10, I think at the time. And we were a dozen people there. None of us saw it, but it's on the film right there on the camera. So those are examples that we're starting to have that overlap of realities that are beginning to blend. It's really exciting.
It is really exciting. I've been out there. I've seen triangular craft with night vision, and this really sort of shocked me. I was looking at this triangle in the sky, and as I was looking at it, it went from point up to point down. And it's like, oh my God, how do they know it was just, wow, there really is stuff out there. This is real. Of course I know it's real, but when you see it, it's like, wow, right?
No, that's a really good point because we can intellectually believe it, but that's very different than having the actual experience. And I think that's the next step that's starting to happen now.
Yes, having the actual experience, even though we're geared toward, we're primed for it, bring it on, and it's like, wow, they show up, and it's like, it still freaks you out. I mean, it's still like, I guess this.
Believe me, I was freaked out by that picture with that being standing there next to me.
I have to say, I felt the same way about acupuncture. I studied that for years, and then I would treat somebody, and they'd actually feel better and say, wow, this stuff really works.
I know.
But getting back to the beings and consciousness, well, first of all, I was curious, have you actually been off planet? Did you feel like you maybe through dream states have been to these other systems?
In dream state, yes. But it's kind of strange and a little bit frustrating. In the 90s, when I was first doing this work, I had a lot more active dream state. I have less contact dreams now, which is very strange. And no, I'm kind of missing it. But I can't say, as Lyssa, as this person, I have been on that ship. But I've had experiences where there's been an overlap, especially in Japan when we're out near Mount Fuji and there's experiences we've had where this thick fog will roll in out of nowhere where you can't even see your hand. And then I psychically see the ship in the fog and the being coming toward me. So again, the blending of realities, but I can't say, I've been there as Lyssa and can come back with a report.
That's very honest of you. Some people say, I talked to Sixto Paz, if you know who he is. He's been to Ganymede and all the, and I think that's great, but how are people changed, I wonder. But the other thing I want to ask you is, like, in these channeling states or when you're contacting different beings, how is your consciousness shifted? Because when I've met these beings in dream states, I have to say, it's a different level of it's like you're high, or just there's a distort for me. And what's your experience with that?
This is where I think my channeling experience has been a really great training for the contact experience, because early on as a channel, I chose not to be an unconscious channel because I felt I wanted to integrate the experience and have it change me in a way. And I know that that's part of because of how I was trained as a channel, and the belief was that if you let yourself not go unconscious, that a deep integration happens. So what's begun to happen then when I channel is that when the beings are talking about levels of consciousness or their philosophies as a civilization, my consciousness becomes theirs in a way. So I actually can see and experience reality as they see it. And then when I come back, it's very hard to explain it. And so when I'm channeling, they use a lot of metaphor to kind of explain the ideas, because right now they're not anything we can grasp yet. And we have to also let go of the mind and the way we've been using it in order to grasp those ideas. So I would say, in terms of how my consciousness has changed, then to answer your question, it's because of the channeling, and the way I channel is a deep, intense focus on a frequency, that I then become that frequency and can experience what they experience in their consciousness and in their lives.
Well, that's the part I'm interested in. So let's say you're channeling Germaine, or how, because that's your most kind of popular thing. I mean, most comes to you more. How, I mean, it's hard to describe consciousness, but how is his consciousness when you get inside his head, or he's inside yours? How is that? What is the perception? I know this is so abstract in a way, but how are your perceptions different? If you smoke marijuana, like, your perceptions are, I'm not really equating it to that, but your consciousness shifts. And then when you're bringing through these energies, your consciousness shifts in a certain way where it's a distortion from human level, but maybe this is the distortion. But I'm just curious about that. As a conscious channel, I've always wanted to ask someone like you that question.
Well, the difficulty you had asking the question is going to mirror the difficulty I'm going to have answering it. But I'm going to give two examples. Sasha is the Pleiadian. There's another being named Hamon that I've been channeling for the last decade, who is Syrian. And both of them are fourth density physical. So Germaine is a consciousness system, so I'm not going to use him because he doesn't have a body and it's harder. That's more abstract. So I can answer the question by contrasting what Sasha's consciousness feels like versus what Hamon's consciousness feels like. Hamon's consciousness, he's a male, and the Syrian consciousness, in my experience, it's very intense. It's very passionate. So when I'm channeling Hamon, his energy feels very directed, like he has a mission, and he's going to deliver whatever it is he wants to deliver. And he's very, like, I feel him more embodying me. And he likes to be outside. So he loves to be doing things outside. He'll be in Sedona doing something. And he likes to, of course, during the contact work outside. And it's more of a full body experience for me. And I can sense how he lives in the moment. Like there's no planning. It's a full expression of his beingness in the moment, which again, as a channel, I had to learn to let go of my editing. I don't want to do that. I don't want to look stupid, blah, blah, blah. So Sasha, on the other hand, Pleiadian energy, she's a female. But the big difference is Sasha is one of my incarnations. So there is a deep overlap of consciousness between me and Sasha. When she first came through in 88, she was very different. And I was told eventually we would integrate. So that integration process has been happening all these decades now. And so when I experience Sasha now, she doesn't feel as different or as other as Hamon does. Right. But she feels like a higher version of me that is more integrated, that is more loving, patient, wise, who has the ability to see the bigger picture with ease in a way that I cannot as a human, but I'm learning how to. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense to me. I totally get that. And because I was also interested in the integration process that, well, Daryl seems to be really evolving. He's not like Bashar, but he's doing more teaching. He's, answering questions as Daryl that Bashar would have answered. So there is, because I've known him for about 30 years and I see the integration. So do you think at some point for you will merge? Because Lyssa, Ronald Holt, whatever you want to call yourself, is just a label for a persona that is also morphing and changing. So it doesn't matter what you call yourself. But do you see an integration of full integration, or is that too scary?
No, I do see it. I'm a Cancer. I like to move slowly and sideways like a crab. So I do see it. And I think if you were to ask the people that know me well, especially my team and friends here in Arizona, they would say they definitely see the integration. I try not to think about it because I want to be incognito as much as possible as a human.
Well, that's okay. But I think it's fascinating because in a way we're all integrating, evolution is happening on the conscious level if you're open to it. If you're open the floodgates, it will flood in. So
I would agree with you also what you said about Daryl. I hope his ears aren't burning, but I've known him a long time too, though of course once I moved away, we don't see each other as much. But we've had a lot of adventures together, and especially when we were younger. And I feel that integration is happening more with him now, even though he might not remember as much content of his channeling as much as I do, because sometimes I try to, although it's hard, it's very dreamlike, but I'm seeing the results of it in him anyway. So yes to your question.
Channeling in general, because I've been studying it since the 80s. I first saw Ramtha in 1981, and that was a full-on force. It's like, oh my God, this woman is not faking it. This is a presence here. Did you ever see Jay-Z Knight channel Ramtha?
I never did, actually.
It's I don't know if she's still channeling, but it was pretty phenomenal to and that was like an awakening for me. It's like, wow, consciousness is not in the body. It must be coming from somewhere else. Just like, our consciousness is basically an ET consciousness or non-human. We're just been kind of culturally conditioned. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, when you said that, I heard Bashar's voice echoing in my head saying, the consciousness is not in the body is in consciousness.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. Do you channel Bashar too? Did you say that?
I've channeled him here and there, mostly in the 90s. But it's only been for specific purposes, and I've been very clear that, it's only for specific purposes, and it's okay because he's intense.
Already engaged. You don't want to go out with somebody else's person. But did you ever channel with Daryl? Did you ever co-channel Bashar together?
Not Bashar together, but we did. The first thing that popped in my head was 1991. We went to Greece, and Daryl and I channeled in the cave of Apollo, where he was channeling Bashar and I was channeling Sasha, and that was just a highlight in my life. It was so awesome.
Wow. What came through in the cave of Apollo?
My God, this is like more than 30 years ago. You think I remember? Yeah, I don't remember.
It's okay. It's okay. But okay, so you're going to be doing contact at the Transcendence Retreat, and will it just be one night, or are you talk about that? What are you going to be doing?
Okay. Well, when I downloaded the information about what I was going to do, so Suzanne could put it on the website, what Sasha told me was that she wanted to do presentations in stages that were getting everybody ready. So the basic presentation, which is on Friday morning, is called Becoming Metahuman, and it's activating the next steps in human evolution. So it's like beginning to get our consciousness ready for basically what you were talking about when you were asking me about how I perceive when I'm channeling. It's like, how do we move our consciousness to that next level that encompasses a larger view? And then the workshop after that is awakening holographic consciousness in the human experience. So now we're beginning to move into that larger view and begin to feel comfortable experiencing it. Then we're doing it's the 3-hour journey on the land. And that is an opening to contact in Sedona's energy portals. So we're now utilizing that work we've done in the previous events into beginning to do contact work on the land using the energy in Sedona as an amplification. So by the time we get to the CE5, which right now is Saturday night, I might be wrong on the date. Yeah, the 21st, I believe, of September. We've already begun building the energy field for the contact work. That was the whole point of all the different ways the workshops were created. So the CE5 is Saturday night, but I know there's limited seating, so they're thinking if it sells out, they might do a second one on the Friday night. But they just opened registration for the CE5 today, I believe.
Right. And you also give your own retreats too, where you do a similar process?
Yes, I actually stopped doing the retreats in 2022. But when I was doing them, because there was such a demand for them, I had to limit it to like my students that I've worked with for many years, because it just became too much and we needed to keep moving on the foundations that were already built. So I haven't kind of figured out how to incorporate new people into the work while still working with my regular students to go deeper and deeper. But I think that I will be doing an online event in August. I haven't scheduled it yet, but it'll be on my website.
Doing something for Portal to Ascension in October too. That kind of.
That is, I believe it's a Lyran conference. So it has to do with Lyra, and that's all I know. Neil just booked me, and then I don't have any information.
Well, he does great stuff, Neil. I mean, he's been an important part. I've been part of that team for a while. But getting back to you, I mean, because your evolution, as you evolve, the information evolves, and so you're integrating more, but also this human perception seems to be changing for a lot of people, like how we look at ourselves. So how is it changing for you after, 30 almost years of channeling and you and your personality and who you are? How are you shifting internally?
Wow, that's a very interesting and deep question that I probably have to think about to give a complete answer. But the first thing that comes to mind is that I used to be more of a type A personality, where I was high strung. Some would say I'm still kind of high strung, but very, very mental. And because I've had to surrender deeper and deeper with the channeling process in order to get to the levels I needed to go to do this deep work, I've had to make those changes in myself as well. So as a human, then, I would say I've had to learn to surrender deeper and deeper and let go of the type A and begin to trust more that the universe really knows what it's doing. Even though we might see things out in the world that look painful that we don't like, well, the universe doesn't make mistakes, so there is a reason for that. So settling into that deeper trust and that deeper wisdom, maybe it's just old age at this point, but it's just been very helpful for me.
Right. No, thank you for that. I know it's a little personal, but not to get personal. You don't have to answer it, but what do you want for what do you want for yourself? Like, what is the thing you're going for?
Ooh.
I also want to say you've been a great service to so many people and it's been important, but for you, yes.
For me, if selfishly,
Yes.
I want that face-to-face relationship with the ETs. And I know it's coming because I can see I'm being prepared for it. And I have a friend that is having one of those kinds of relationships, and I'm being trained by them, his friends too. So if I could say there was one thing I wanted for myself, I'm not like a very material person. I don't want a lot of things. That is what I want. I feel like that's why I'm here.
And if you get that, let's say that happens, okay, wow, they show up right there, and then what would that do for you? And then what would be your highest excitement after that?
Well, if that happened, the biggest wish for that is the relationship, the ongoing relationship. It's not the, oh, one and done kind of thing, and then I can go brag about it. That's not, I want the relationship. I've had the relationship this way, but I need to integrate the physical because I feel for me personally, I have this stuff, but I need to ground it. And that's been a challenge for me to ground things. So if that happened and I had the ongoing relationship, then what my highest excitement would be to share it. Because there is no other reason for me to have it. Just for my own satisfaction isn't enough. I would have to share it because that's why I'm here. That's what my heart desires.
That's beautiful. Thank you for being so open and honest. And, grounding it, like you said, is an important part of the process because we're bringing light into the body, into the earth, and we're making the earth eventually into a star by illuminating the earth bodies. I think that's what ascension is. And this, it hasn't been lately the big talk for, in like the 80s, 90s, everyone wanted to ascend. Ramtha used to say, everyone wants to ascend and no one wants to live. He says, he would say, ascension comes from a life well lived, through, he doesn't say the highest excitement, but I would guess Bashar would add that part, through following your highest excitement. And I think that's what's been so great about a kind of subculture we've all been a part of, is that we've allowed ourselves to pursue consciousness as opposed to materiality, which is also great. It's also something, but it's secondary to this bigger thing that I don't even know what this thing is. My next book is sort of about, well, who's here really? What is the phenomena, especially looking at it from the government side of it? Like, what are they covering up? I think it's not, I think they don't understand what it is, right? Because they're looking at it in terms of hardware. Let's how to make weapons, and you're not going to understand anything.
You hit the nail on the head. What they're covering up is their non-understanding of the phenomenon, and they cannot deal with not understanding something because then it can't be controlled.
Right, that's right. Yes, and so we're trying to get underneath that and not, I think, well, I don't know you that well, but not try to understand it, but become it. Become that thing.
They're only going to understand it by how we live it. Those of us who are pioneering in this field, that's why, I don't like to go into this kind of talk, but that's why, they have government people at these UFO conferences and stuff. They don't understand it. They've got to tap into the people who seem to be living it in order to understand it.
Well, that's why they're all around Chris Bledsoe. You know who Chris Bledsoe is? Oh, you should look him up. He wrote a book called UFOs of God. He is a very spiritual person.
Oh, I heard about that book. Okay.
Yes, no, he is living it. He is I think, I've talked to him, I've interviewed him, very pure being. And these things are showing up. This manifestation of this lady is coming, like the divine feminine is appearing to him. And he is from what I've seen, a very humble. He is living that truth of being a pure, compassionate person, and I think that's what we're really here for. Well, I have one more question, because we're really out there and go out in space, but sometimes the human level comes in, and you stub your toe, you do that. It's like, how do we? I'm trying to integrate that myself. How do we integrate our very human experience? I get angry at someone because they did something I didn't like. Just very ego or physical, and then it's like, oh, I thought I was more evolved than that. So how do you integrate it?
Well, I told you I was a type A, which meant in the past I did not really process my emotions. I didn't understand my emotional body, and it created a lot of physical pain in my body. And so I've been really, with their help, trying to open the emotional body, to reconnect it. Because what I've learned from them is that the way they process emotion, and actually Bashar says this too, is that they let it flow through them. And when we truly let it flow through us without judgment, without projection, that we don't get stuck in it. But if we haven't trained ourselves how to do that, it's not like just suddenly one day we can do it because we have a lot of blocked up stuff. So I've been personally working on trying to unblock the stuff,
Yeah.
let it flow so that I can, in a sense, be more like Sasha. And I think that's what she's helping me with.
Well, when you say you get help from them, how actually are they helping you with the human?
It's more it's more through the intellect, I have to say, which is through the channeling. So when, for example, I was talking earlier about how I was channeling the information about there's a fly, about the different wounds from the different civilizations. And as they give me the information about what they experienced and why they experienced it, I feel the hologram of that emotional experience of our galactic family. And somehow feeling or experiencing that bigger picture connects me to it in a way that just being a human, I haven't been able to access.
Well, give me an example of just what you were just saying, like if you don't mind, like something that came up and that you.
Okay. Oh boy. I wish I could find something right away.
Well,
I think well, okay, here's one. Physically, I have always, since I was basically since I'm in my late 20s, had issues with my spine. So I had scoliosis. My alignment, when I go to the chiropractor, I can't hold it very long. And I've had many decades of therapy and this and that. But really the last decade, I've come to see that my issues with that are entirely connected to my emotional body in that I haven't learned how to run the energy of my emotional body. So it goes into my vertebrae and jacks me. I had a tragedy happen in my family a couple of days ago. I'm still kind of waiting to hear what happened. Some of my family members were in a car accident, and one is not doing very well, who's a baby. And I immediately saw I was fine. And when that emotion came, it jacked my neck. So that is a direct way to see, hey, I've got to somehow learn how to process my emotions and run them and be in the moment with them so that I don't do this to myself.
right. So the key is what? Feeling the emotions, letting the anxiety be felt instead of trying to avoid it somehow. Is that what you would say?
Well, first of all, in all honesty, I can't tell you what the key is because if I knew it 100%, I wouldn't still be feeling it. But I'm much better than I used to be. So it has to do with learning, being aware enough moment to moment in your life where you can feel and flow with the emotional flow that's moving through you. It's kind of like the metaphor Sasha always uses is like surfing. If you're on the surfboard thinking about the angle at which you're going to take the next wave, you're going to wipe out. You have to be fully embodied in that moment on the surfboard to have the balance.
Right.
And that is something when we were third density, as a third density species, we weren't capable of doing because we were all linear and all in the mind. But now we're in this transitory period where we have to make the shift. So we're learning to let go of one way and move into another way, which is why we're struggling with this right now.
Thank you for that answer, because I just pulled like this hamstring that's very painful, and have you ever had that happen? And it's like,
Yeah.
resist. I know not exactly when it happened, but I knew what was happening emotionally. Someone was saying something and I felt like feel like they were controlling a situation, and I just kind of pulled myself back, and it's like, yeah, so I'm looking at the human emotional level, and we have to just, well, forgive ourselves, I suppose, and also acknowledge the parts that were being held back, not acting.
And I want to acknowledge what you just said, because you said how sometimes we beat ourselves up or we're not spiritual enough, but recognizing the connection between the hamstring and that emotional issue. I mean, how many generations ago, or maybe 30 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that connection in the same way. So there's progress.
No, I think there's progress. Louise Hay was really instrumental in making those emotional connections, and everything that we're doing, and all the things with these these galactic races working through their stuff, and seeing the after effects in the human lineage. It's all about clearing, so each moment we can be in our highest excitement, and that's what it's been for me right now, talking to you. So my highest excitement. No, thank you. So anything else you want to add? I mean, or about Sedona, get people excited about that?
Yeah, I am super excited, especially about the contact stuff in Sedona, because it's the weekend. I always used to do my retreat every year. And when I stopped doing it, I said to the universe, I can't manage this anymore. I need somebody else to manage it. So then now somebody else is managing it, and I'm still doing the CE5. So I'm going to have some of my team there. Some of my students from Japan are going to be there. So I invite everyone to join.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I've been talking to Lyssa Ronald Holt, the author of so many great, fantastic books on our intersection with these higher consciousness fields and the human realm. And she's going to be at the Sedona Transcendent Retreat, September 19th to 21st, or is it 19th to 22nd?
22nd now, I think, yeah.
Second, yeah. 19th to the 22nd of September 2024. So be there, get tickets, SedonaTranscendentRetreats.com. Thank you, I'm Alan Steinfeld, and stay tuned.